Hey there. So I believe we are live on LinkedIn and YouTube. I hope we are. Or we're just speaking to an empty empty room at this point. Amazing to see you both here. What we wanted to do today. So what are we doing today? We are previewing the recent Working Wellbeings podcast that we recorded live at the Watercooler back in May. I can't believe how the time flies. We've recorded loads of amazing episodes there. So we wanted to give people a little bit of insight in terms of what they cover. And also hopefully drive some people towards it so that they'll all go and have a listen, go and have a watch. We are also really pleased, excited to be supported on this version of the series by WellHub, which is amazing. We have Hannah Jensen here from WellHub, who's going to talk to us all about that. But we're really excited about that relationship. So yeah, where to start? Should we do some quick intros? I mean, hopefully some of the people seeing this now will know myself and Alethea, co-founders of Working Well Community. Is that your entire identity, Alethea?
Do you know what? I feel like I've got a few too many identities at the moment. A few too many things going on. But yes, we have told this story many times, haven't we, Matt? But yes, we came together in the COVID era to start to bring this community together. Initially with our little 3-day conference, 2-day conference, can't remember. So yeah, really excited to still be going strong and getting stronger by the minute and be able to collaborate with WellHub. Thank you, Hannah. So yeah, really enjoy wearing this hat, which is the one as a co-host of the Working Well community. I mean, we don't like to interfere too much, do we, Matt? We try to kind of get the community to do its own thing.
That's the plan.
And fuel itself. It's a peer-led thing. But yeah, my other hats that I wear are hat of mum. Also a yoga teacher, mostly working in workplaces, which I absolutely love. And then yeah, my day job, so to speak, working in-house on staff experience and wellbeing in an NHS trust. So was so interested to be able to sit and host some of the conversations that we had in the pod at the Watercooler. So I can't wait to share a little bit about that in this conversation. But I'll hand over to you, Hannah, for a bit of an intro on you and WellHub.
Yeah, and just quickly, Hannah, you can introduce yourself as well, because you've got the longest job title I've ever seen. So I'll let you do that rather than us.
Well, thanks, Matt and Alethea, for having me on here today. It's really great to be on this podcast. So I'm Hannah Jensen and I look after marketing in the UK, and I work at WellHub. And basically, for those of you who don't know what WellHub is, it's a corporate benefits platform, and essentially what we do is we connect employees to basically the best options in like fitness, mindfulness, therapy, nutrition and sleep. And it's basically all in one subscription that, I mean, it costs less than a gym membership. So what's not to love? It's holistic well-being under one umbrella.
Yay. Big fan. Big fan. And thank you so much, Hannah, for supporting the Working Wellbeings podcast. It's an exciting step for us, and obviously with my corporate yoga background, when this news came in that it was WellHub that we were going to be working with, obviously I'm particularly delighted because I'm such an advocate of that part of the process. I think the strategy, the thinking is all really important, but an action is also needed to support people now in the work that they do. And if that's through mindfulness sessions and yoga, I know some people kind of have that in the nice to have fluff box, but I'm a huge advocate of its value and importance. So keep up the good work with WellHub.
Brilliant. Thank you. I mean, I think it's great. Like, it totally aligns to our kind of like our corporate mission, which is very much about, you know, wanting to make every company a well-being company. And I think, you know, we really do feel that well-being should be like the number one priority for all HR leaders. You know, I think it ultimately underpins and reinforces like absolutely everything that you do at the end of the day.
Couldn't
Yeah,
agree
I want to
more.
get into a bit of this. I got some questions around this, but
No.
we'll leave them just for a second. So,
Yeah.
just to explain a little bit more. So, we attended the Watercooler event back in May at XL London. We had an amazing pod there. Shout out to our partners at Blocko as well. They provided us this cool, like, what would you describe it as? Like someone called it hamster wheel to me the other day. That's kind of what it looked like. But one of these booths where we had it all set up, and we got our guests in, and we interviewed them on these micro podcast formats, so kind of 25 to 30-minute conversations about essentially lots of different things, but anything that was top of mind for them. And what was more exciting was the guests themselves. So in total, over 2 days, we recorded 23 podcasts. Would you believe it? Have you recovered from it yet? Oh,
do you know what? I haven't. It is a lot of talking, isn't it? Which I'm quite good at, but by the end of it, I think we had talked ourselves out, hadn't we?
A little bit. But we had some amazing people in there. So the way it works is we are actually launching 2 series of the podcast off the back of it. So we are launching a leaders series, which went live on Monday, a couple of days ago, which we can tell you a little bit more about. So the leaders series are people who are wellbeing leaders within an organization. They're doing the job, right? And that is the primary purpose behind our podcast, the Working Wellbeing podcast, is to get the unfiltered stories from these wellbeing leaders, the good, the bad, the ugly, their journeys into the roles that they found themselves in now. And we had all sorts of people representing all sorts of different organizations in there. So I've got some names here. I'll drop a few names: British Airways, National Highways, the Gym Group, Entain, Ericsson, Yelp. So loads of some from big corporates. There's some slightly smaller organizations along the way, but hearing about their challenges and their practical insights as well, it really helps them to do their job. So we've got the Leaders series, which we can talk about, but then we also have the Thinkers series, which is launching in a couple of weeks' time. And that is experts, authors, luminaries from the world of workplace wellbeing, including people like Peter Cheese, who's the chief exec of the CIPD, and Dame Carol Black, who I never know how to introduce her. Just Dame Carol Black. Everyone knows Dame Carol Black. Like,
Can't we just go with like DCB?
DCB, the queen of workplace wellbeing. People of this ilk who brought a slightly different angle to it. It's interesting to see some of the differences between those episodes. Not necessarily doing the job of a wellbeing leader within an organization, but have so much to add in terms of the wider landscape and how organizations can improve employee well-being. So really excited about getting those 2 series launched. And I wondered whether I could pick out, there were a few themes that came out from these series, from these episodes, and get your thoughts on them. Does that sound a good place to start?
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the ones, which sounds a little bit, let's start with the boring one. Sounds a little bit boring, only because everyone always talks about it. You mentioned it in the intro, but it's still really important, is taking a strategic approach to this stuff. And what maybe slightly more interesting, one of the terms that came out in a couple of the podcasts. So Jason from Ericsson, you did that interview, didn't you, Alethea? And also Stella from Entain, who I spoke to. They both mentioned this idea of glocal. Like, how do you manage well-being on a large scale, but also represent people on the front line at a local level as well? And yeah, so any thoughts on that as a kind of theme?
Definitely. Well, actually, Hannah, we'll go to you first, because you've got a global organization to give some context.
I mean, I love the term glocal. It's like global and local fused together, isn't it? I mean, I think it is important, because there are so many of these businesses which do have, like, they need to have like a global vision and like really clear kind of pillars that really establish what those kind of core well-being like principles and focus areas are. But you need that to kind of apply at like a worldwide kind of scale, and they need to have that consistency and that kind of shared language, I think. But I think what they're kind of saying with that, despite having those kind of bigger pillars, you really need to understand what those kind of local needs are and have like a really clear assessment by market. So what are those kind of specific health kind of challenges? What are the cultural norms? What are the kind of preferred well-being activities in like each region or kind of country? And I think a big part of that is for employers to really understand what their employees' needs are. So whether that's kind of through surveys, focus groups, discussions, and having things like local leaders and well-being champions, I think that can really help to kind of really understand what's popular and like what's kind of the need, if you want. And I think what can really help is then kind of working with companies who really understand those kind of complexities of kind of global well-being, and then work with kind of platforms that kind of, I guess, like has that breadth and that kind of localized like relevant. And for instance, like we've seen like paddle being like massive in the US, and it's starting to get traction in the UK. So now we're like, okay, like more people want paddle partners, or people want to be kind of thinking about like other well-being activities. So okay, who are the different partners that we want to add to our network? What are those kind of holistic offerings? And how's that really going to work? And I think from an HR point of view, it's kind of what they want is that centralized management, but with almost like localized kind of customization. And I think this is more and more the trend that we see every time we're talking to a lot of these kind of big global companies.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think my little bit to add is just, I think there's some global organizations that aren't necessarily big as well. So and I think what this boils down to is in any organization, even if you actually don't have a footprint outside of a particular country, reality is we're talking about human beings and their different needs, life stages, nuances, cultural backgrounds, even if we all live in one particular place. And so actually, really, this is just how, even if we're not literally talking about local and global in terms of our planet, it's about global thinking for your population of people that you're looking after. And so even if you're not actually dealing with an actual global organization and having to deliver this across multiple markets, we're always, no matter how big the company, having to think about diverse needs. And actually, that's one of the biggest challenges in this work, I think, whether it's about how we work with partners or whether it's about what you're doing internally. It's just a massive challenge. So actually, reality is, even if you're just in a small city in the UK, you still need to have this local thinking because it's people. Yeah. And we've got lots of needs and a very diverse background.
I'm with you. And personalization came up quite a lot as well. But there's some really practical bits around this in the podcast through those conversations. I know they're only kind of 25-30 minute conversations with these wellbeing leaders, but we really pushed them on, like what exactly are they doing? So I know that you spoke to Jason at Ericsson, and he described the Wellbeing Champions Network that they've got, how they utilize that effectively. The other one that stands out to me when I think of this is Miriam from Yelp, so Chief Culture Officer at Yelp. So she talked a lot about storytelling as a way of, scaling well-being across a whole organization, even when it's really quite large. Just let me, while I remember it, I meant to do this at the start. Let me stick the QR code in the top left-hand corner. If anyone does want to listen to any of these episodes, you're more than welcome. Like I say, the first series is now live, so you can hear the wellbeing leaders themselves talking about some of these challenges.
Yeah, I loved that conversation with Jason. He was awesome.
Yeah. No, they were good. So there was a piece around kind of strategically that kind of leads us into the other piece, which was around taking a really preventative approach to wellbeing, which I know has been a real trend in the industry. But again, we heard a number of different people talking. Jonathan Hill, I interviewed him from Anglian Water, head of occupational health at Anglian Water. His was interesting. He talked about what learning they could take from things like elite sport, the world of elite sport, and use those sorts of things to build levels of resilience. And I know resilience has become a little bit of a dirty word across certain places, but the way that he described it as a really preventative, proactive way of helping and supporting people to manage their well-being through the use of, some of the things that you've mentioned, Hannah, was really quite powerful. And you also, Alethea, you spoke to Faye, didn't you? Faye Simpkins at National Highways. She talked a lot about supporting the front line stuff.
Yeah, that she was awesome. They have a lot of kind of ex-military, ex-blue lighters at National Highways, so it's a lot of people in their sort of second careers, or third careers even potentially, and with that, we're potentially talking about a slightly maturer workforce, and they already kind of know what a lot of their workforce is dealing with, plus they've got the kind of inevitable workplace-based kind of ailments and injuries that come up, MSK things. So they've got some work going on at the moment to try and really understand how they can just, rather than being caught off guard and being surprised at the rate of MSK, injuries and things that come up, or so long-term health conditions that their workforce are experiencing, being more proactive and having support systems in place. I mean, I think she even mentioned, things like, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and, just really kind of getting into that preventative space of interventions and education to help support people and keep them safe whilst working and keep them able to work. So it's really exciting. And of course, obviously, with yoga in mind as well, and an advocate of that, I kind of just think it's such an easy opportunity in a way, just to try and get in there early on and tackle some of the MSK stuff in particular.
Yeah. Just very quickly, because I know I wanted to ask you about this. The personalization is really interesting, and one of it was kind of a theme that came up not only in our interviews but also during the broader event, was about generational differences. And I think you've seen some of that, right? You've seen how different generations interact and access this sort of support.
Yeah, 100%. I think definitely well-being really needs to address like the different specific demographics and life stages, and we need to make sure that we're tailoring like well-being support to those different kind of employee groups. I think that's really important. I think it was Faye, they really did talk about the kind of the physical health needs of that kind of the older workforce, particularly those in kind of those really physically demanding jobs. How can we support those needs? But also like women in the workforce, there's now a much greater need to have menopause support, specific kind of female health and hormone support. All of these things are now like being seen as such a great priority. And so this is where there isn't a one size fits all. We need to make sure that, well-being is ultimately holistic, and we need to make sure that we are encompassing and encapsulating all of the needs of a very diverse workforce. And those workforces, their needs are becoming more and more kind of fractured, and so having something where you can kind of capture stuff under one umbrella is really important. But equally, one of the things that we've seen is particularly with a lot of the companies that we work with who have a kind of a young workforce, particularly kind of like a Gen Z demographic, they think very differently about kind of health. They're very much more kind of proactive. So it's really great to kind of see kind of the younger generation really taking their health into their own hands, doing things like yoga, really taking kind of those early intervention strategies and really thinking about proactive care. So I think this is a really nice kind of influx that we're going, and it's actually having a knock-on effect to kind of other people within the rest of the business.
Yeah, and you told me a mind-blowing statistic with one of your clients who you may or may not be able to name, but you said that there's a huge amount.
One of the it's a large technology company that we work with, and honestly, the enrollment rate that they have in the UK, it's I mean, it's over like 80%. It's amazing. And a big part of that is because they have a really young workforce and they're constantly coming to us with like new ideas of like what they want and what their expectation is. So, for instance, we've started working with loads of like rock climbing partners because that's something how people were wanting to spend their time kind of being active. And then other people were saying, oh, you know, we want to have more like massages and spa solutions because, you know, where they want to have that kind of time out to themselves. So again, you know, it's different needs, and it's making sure that we're able to kind of provide that access at the end of the day.
Yeah, love it, love it. And you mentioned women's health, so Alethea, you seem to be on a little bit of a mission at the event to talk to people about women's health, which was great. And they came to us wanting to talk about that theme as well. Ruth Jackson at the gym group, absolutely. I think that was a theme of that episode. I spoke to Lady Lauren Lunnis, who's wellbeing coordinator at BNP Paribas as well, big bank. So she was talking about that whole piece. What were your kind of key insights on that?
For me, I think what's happening is we've had menopause on the table for a while now, out of absolute need. I mean, we've got an aging workforce. Women, sadly, the rates of women leaving the workplace because of menopause symptoms and not being able to manage them themselves, or feeling that they're not being supported or enabled to continue doing their work whilst dealing with those symptoms, that challenge is becoming so acute that women are leaving the workforce. So for some time we've kind of had menopause on the table and started to address it, and I think it's incredible the progress that's been made, but what it's done is opened up the conversation about other women's health conditions and challenges, and not even sort of tough symptoms, but just the realities of women's hormonal cycles, for example, like the menstrual cycles. It's not an illness, you know, it's just how women live. And finally we're getting to the point where we're starting to acknowledge how that works, and that maybe we could make reasonable adjustments to support women literally on a monthly basis to be their best and to thrive at work. So I just think it's really fascinating that we're kind of finally lifting the lid on all of this stuff, and I think there's so much more to come. You know, there's the really tough stuff, things like infertility, endometriosis, but thankfully also just the basics of like what it is to be a woman. Really exciting thing that we've got going on at in my NHS trust is some fast track cervical screening for staff, which is just simply about enabling staff to get access. Clinical staff who are normally working 12-hour shifts, missing their cervical screening because they're dealing and supporting the population with their health challenges. Our staff are missing their own cervical screening appointments to serve the public. And so by having a really small clinic capacity that's for staff only, will mean that we're not having and missing those important smear tests. So I just think it's a really fascinating time, and that was definitely evident in the conversations that had to come up. I mean, I think Faye and I even ended up doing our pelvic floor exercises together. I mean, we cut that bit out of the podcast, but you know, we got down to our pelvic floor health as a topic of conversation.
I tell you what, one thing I didn't miss at this year's event versus last year's event was last year they had the simulators, so it simulated period pain and menopause. I do not miss putting those on because that was horrible.
That is brilliant. If anyone's looking for a workplace empathy tool, the Menovest is just incredible. They've also got Crampster now, which is menstrual cramp simulation.
Well, I think that was the one. That was the one. I had 10 levels. So obviously being a guy, I was like, just put it up to level 10. And at level 7, I was basically begging them to take it off. So very quick. We'll segue on to another. You're getting some positive comments in the in the chat as well. There you go, Hannah. And
brilliant.
That kind of links us on to another thing I wanted to quickly ask you both about, was around the role that technology plays. So that came out as a bit of a theme around technology. AI is kind of looming over this whole area. Your colleague Gina Alcorn joined us on the pod live at the event, and she talked about the importance of, you know, tech platforms like yourselves and others in terms of enhancing people's well-being. Do you see that as a continuing trend? Imagine you said no.
So,
no.
Yeah, no, can you imagine? I mean, I do think that the impact of AI on health and well-being in the workplace is going to be a kind of continually evolving topic. And I think there's probably two schools of thought in terms of how it's affecting people. I feel like there are some people who can really see the benefit of it, how it can help them, and like how it can make their lives easier. And then I think there are other people where there is there are concerns about it kind of taking their jobs, and what does it really mean, and am I going to be able to upskill myself? But I think for me, the bit that we need to focus on really is around like, but what can AI do, and what can it do for people? Again, like we were talking about earlier, it's all about people at the end of the day, and how can we focus on that kind of human enhancement versus like the automation? And I think that's kind of what we need to be thinking about. So for me, it's around maybe how do we position AI as a tool to support rather than maybe diminish the kind of the human capabilities and well-being. And it's about how can we sustain kind of almost that human resilience and inclusion and purpose alongside like innovation. And I think the two things go hand in hand together. And I think organizations, they need to foster a bit more of maybe a people-centered like digital culture. So basically, it almost is like, as these tools get designed and they evolve, it's how we think about co-designing AI tools with kind of employee inclusivity in mind, and basically how can we ensure that like really clear information on how AI can actually enhance roles rather than it being like a detriment. And I think that's going to almost alleviate a lot of that kind of like that stress that people are maybe starting to feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you
Alicia,
think,
any
Matt?
thoughts?
Well, what about you? What do you think?
What about me? I think AI is taking over the world. We all just need to lay down and let it.
Yeah.
Terminator
I do.
style. No.
Yeah. I was
Look,
just going to say, like, I do think that there is a thing around like having ethical AI is kind of paramount though. And maybe this is where companies need to like develop those really clear policies with like ethical guidelines and standards for AI tools. And I think when you have that in place, again, that's something that I think is really paramount.
Yeah. No, I agree. I tell you what I think. I think I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows. But I think that therefore that's what highlights the importance of, you know, it sounds like a plug. It is a total plug. But you know, having the conversations like we had on the podcast. You know, if you listen to the podcast, you are not gonna go away from them with like a prescription, like, oh, now I need to do these 4 things, and suddenly, you know, no one in my organization will ever be stressed again, and well-being will always be optimized. You know, these people aren't perfect, but they are people doing the job on the front line. They've faced the challenges that you're facing, and that's one of the things that we exist for as a community, is to connect those individuals to one another. You know, I think that by, you know, listening and having that dialogue and that conversation with well-being leaders, but also with experts who can kind of see it from the outside in, we can try to work some of this stuff out, because like you say, there's lots of really important topics, and I think we need to work on those together. It's the whole point of this, right?
Yeah. And I think there is a way that AI can, you know, be integrated with kind of existing like well-being programs, and it can, you know, really help to create that more kind of personalized like approach. So I think there's a massive shift there when it's like personalized health and well-being, and I think AI can be used in a positive way to kind of facilitate that.
Yeah, and I think it was also about scalability, isn't it, and engagement. So perhaps by letting technology do some of these things that we've had to kind of manually do ourselves, like take physio assessment, for example, to understand, you know, or even just workstation assessment. You know, that's been manually done, hasn't it, by the health and safety manager who comes around and, you know, looks what's under your feet and what height your screen is. You know, there's perhaps a certain element of that that's going to be needed, but what we can do with with AI and with better technology is kind of have a bit of a, you know, a bit more of a prescription for what's right for you, both in terms of management of current symptoms, but also preventative stuff. Like I think it was Shane from Vitru Health who I spoke to on the last series of the podcast, and they've got like a physio AI assessment tool that can almost sort of tell you, well, if you carry on doing that, you're going to have like some back trouble in 2 years. You'll be shortening your hamstrings by this much because of how much you're sitting down, and you're likely to, you know, need X, Y, and Z. And perhaps by this sort of more formal prescription being provided to us, we then will engage better with the thing that makes it preventative, like doing some exercises or doing your rehab or not spending so much time sitting and using a standing desk. So perhaps it's the technology that just assists us to kind of take things a little bit more seriously. One of the biggest challenges with physio is people not doing their rehab, you know, because people don't engage in it. And people, like, I don't know, maybe expect the magic to happen just because they've got it written down on a sheet of paper, but you've got to do it. So maybe if the technology helps us be more accountable and help us to track, then that's where the difference is.
Absolutely. Well, look, we were aiming for half an hour, and that's absolutely flown by. That's absolutely flown by. As you can see, if you're listening to this live or if you're listening to the recording of this, there are so many amazing insights and conversations that need to be had, have been had on the podcast. So definitely listen into those. You know, we've got the leaders series, which is up live now. You can scan the top left hand corner and listen to those right now. They're available on Spotify and YouTube as well, so you can give them a listen. We'd love to hear your thoughts as well, either in the comments below or when you're watching those different videos on YouTube. Leave them in the comments, because we'd love to hear, you know, who do you want to hear from in the future as well? You know, we're continuing these conversations. What does that look like? I'm going to do one final plug for, in addition to the podcast, we've also got the community. So we've got the Working Well community, which our mission is to enhance the role of wellbeing leaders and bring all these amazing wellbeing leaders together. You can join the community completely for free in the top left-hand corner with that QR code. So give that a scan if you're interested. Final kind of thanks, I guess, to Hannah in particular and WellHub for supporting us on this mission and on this journey. We're really looking forward to seeing how that evolves over the coming weeks and months. Yeah, and thank you both for attending today. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Yeah, awesome. Nice to chat to you guys. Thanks, Hannah, for the time.
Thank you. It's been great.
No worries.
Awesome. See you next time.
See you next time, both. See you then.
Bye.